Okay, hello everybody. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar all about the South African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds, otherwise known as SANCCOB. We are so excited to have you join us today to learn more about this amazing organization and from Jessica Egerer. My name is Sarah Halson. I am the program coordinator for Detroit Audubon, an organization dedicated to fostering the appreciation and conservation of birds and the environment that we share. We could not do the work we do without our funders and members, so I wanted to thank those of you who are members and are supporting projects like these today. We also have Ava Landgraf with us today, Detroit Audubon's conservation coordinator, and she will be monitoring the chat for your questions. Some quick Zoom housekeeping before we begin today. You're able to control your video and microphone in the bottom left of your screen. We ask that you keep yourself muted so that we do not have feedback from your microphones. You can see also there's a closed captioning option available today by clicking on the live transcript on the bottom of your screen. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation, so please add any questions that you might have to the chat. We are also recording the webinar today, and it will be shared to you via email in the next week or two. If you have any further questions, please reach out to me or to Ava, and we will do our best to assist you. Now I'd like to introduce Jessica. Jessica Egerer is a bird department zookeeper at the Detroit Zoo in Royal Oak, Michigan, and she spent about 3 weeks working with SANCCOB in South Africa and penguins in 2018. Thank you and welcome, Jessica.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Jessica, and as Sarah mentioned, I am a zookeeper at the Detroit Zoo. So both through my work and outside of my work, I am extremely passionate about avian conservation. So I'm excited to be here today to introduce you to this organization that is very near and dear to my heart. And they are called SANCCOB. They are the South African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds. Just trying to get my screen to flip. There we go. Okay. So to start us out, I just have a brief outline so you have an idea of the direction of this discussion. So first, I'll just go over a little bit about penguins, talk about some of their adaptations that set them apart from other avian species. I will highlight the African penguin. They are the spotlight species to this presentation and of SANCCOB. Next, I'll go into an introduction of the organization, talk a little bit about their history and their overall mission. I'd like to talk about some of the ongoing research initiatives that they have, and this goes right into the transponder work that they are putting on, and it's some really cool technology that's contributing to research. Oil spill relief is a huge subject for this organization. They are situated by the ocean. They're dealing with seabirds, so oil spill relief is a huge topic for them. I will then go into a bit more about my personal experience at the organization in 2018, share some photos and some stories from my time there. I'd like to also outline the current opportunities that the centers have, and just end by talking briefly about ways to strengthen awareness for not only this organization, but organizations alike dealing with different species for a common goal. All right, without further ado, let's talk about penguins. Okay, so we all know that penguins are a group of aquatic flightless birds. They do have quite a few adaptations that set them apart from other avian species that make them so well adapted to living in the water. So one of these features is their feathers. And when we're considering their feathers, penguins have more feathers than any other avian species. This works to their advantage because combined with the fact that they have a lot of feathers, feathers also have a barbule structure that kind of works to Velcro them together. So that's helping the penguins by trapping air against their body and keeping them insulated. Also, this aids in waterproofing for these birds. To make sure that their feathers are maintaining that structure and working to their advantage, they undergo an annual catastrophic molt. So during this process, they will lose all of their old feathers over about 2 to 4 weeks and gain a whole new set of feathers. So that's crucial for them. They also have a really neat form of built-in camouflage with their plumage, and it's known as counter shading. So you'll notice penguins have dark feathers on the back, light feathers on the front. And if you consider a penguin swimming horizontally through the water, anything above the penguin looking down will have a hard time seeing it because those dark feathers will blend in with the dark color of the ocean floor. And vice versa, anything underneath it looking up, those white feathers are going to be blending in with the reflection of the sun on the water. These birds also have salt glands, which are also known as supraorbital glands. And this is an adaptation that a lot of sea mammals have and other sea birds. And these glands work to regulate and remove excess salt. So when they're feeding in the ocean, they're not going to become dehydrated. They have a feature that helps them work against that. And lastly, these birds have dense bones, whereas birds that fly have hollow bones. And again, that works to their advantage because if they had hollow bones, they'd be dealing with buoyancy issues, and that would not be ideal. Okay, geographic range. Penguins almost exclusively live in the southern hemisphere. There is one species that acts as a bit of the exception. So if we look at this map, this right here represents the Galapagos Islands. And this map doesn't show the equator, but it would be running right along here through the northern range of these islands through here. So technically there is a section of this population of Galapagos penguins that lives in the northern hemisphere. But other than that, they all are happily situated down here. So the question is why? And there are some different theories about this. So one of them is water temperature. We just talked about how these birds are built for staying insulated. So it's thought that they prefer these cooler water temperatures because they have that adaptation. So it wouldn't make much sense for them to be swimming into warmer waters that are situated closer to our equator and above when they have these currents down here to be working with. We also know that penguins are not going to move over large distances of land. So we would not expect a penguin to migrate up through the center of Africa. Again, these birds rely on the water to live, so they're going to stay by those coasts. And finally, we have to consider that it would be a challenge for penguins to move north and find new territory. If that were to happen, you know, these birds may be scared away by curious people. They may be picked off by land predators that they're not used to seeing. So there's a lot of factors that are kind of keeping them in their range here. All right, species. So with this, it does depend a little bit on who you talk to. So taxonomists agree that there are at least 16 species of penguins, although there are currently being arguments made for up to 22, sometimes even more. In my career and my experience, I have most frequently heard that there are 17 to 18 species of penguins. And the determining factor there is whether or not you are splitting or clumping the rockhopper species together. So you can see in this infographic here, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Peppermint Narwhal, they are a really cool brand that creates these animal-themed infographics. And I love them because they're simple, but you can really gain a lot of information from them. So this one outlines 18 species, and it does split apart the northern and southern rockhoppers. And you can see the main differences in the length of the crest there. So again, this is showing the species alphabetically. Sometimes they will show them more based on geographic range or size or different things. But we are going to hone in on this guy right here, the African penguin. Okay, got a quick clip here for you. Hopefully it's not too loud on your end. Okay, the infamous African penguin Bray. So due to the sound that they make, they've been given a few other names. They are also known as the jackass penguin, and people in Africa will oftentimes call them beach donkeys as well. They also have been given the name black-footed penguin. You can see they have this pink and black speckled pattern on their feet. So the purpose of this slide is just to let you know that all of these names are interchangeable for the same species. When I was first introduced to the African penguin, they were introduced to me as the black-footed penguin. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, and all of these names are interchangeable. Okay, geographic range for African penguins specifically. So African penguins are endemic to southwestern Africa. They live in the countries of Namibia and South Africa. And they also inhabit a series of islands off the coast all through this range. Historically, two very popular islands have been Dassin Island and Robben Island. There is also a series of smaller islands off the coast of Namibia known as the Penguin Islands. There are a series of penguin islands throughout the Southern Hemisphere, but the one off the coast of Namibia is clearly speaking of African penguins. And again, there's smaller islands down through here, closer to Port Elizabeth, that they inhabit as well. Conservation status. So this is why, a big part of the reason why I'm here today talking about this and spreading the mission of organizations like SANCCOB is because unfortunately, this species is endangered and their population is decreasing. The species was uplisted in 2010 from vulnerable to endangered. And if we are talking about this number-wise, prior to the MV treasure spill that occurred in 2000, there were about 46,500 pairs of this bird. And the current South African population contains 13,000 pairs. So it's pretty significantly declined. And of course, we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Historically, there has been egg removal and guano removal taking place in the colonies of these birds. So people were taking the guano and using it as fertilizer, when really these birds were depending on the buildup of their guano over time, creating these kind of shelving units that they could build nests in and colonize off of. That doesn't happen anymore, but that was one of the historical events that really, started the decline for this bird. Outside of that, there's unfortunately a series of other plights that these birds are facing. So there's human encroachment, buildings and houses being built closer to the shores where these birds are trying to keep things established. There's also competition for food and movement of food and oil spills, lots of factors here. Physical features. Okay, so if we start on the left here, we have two adult African penguins. You can see that they have this solid black band that runs along their side, up under their chin and down the other side. Each adult bird also has a series of dots on its front side, and that is specific to them. So just like our thumbprints are our own, each adult African penguin has their own pattern. They also have this pink patch right above their eye where they are lacking feathers, and that patch will change in coloration based on how they're thermoregulating. If we move down to the bottom here in the middle, this is an adult bird who's getting ready to undergo that catastrophic molt. So he's already spent some time out at sea, filling up on fish, and he is now hauled out on land where this bird will spend the next 2 to 4 weeks, allowing those old feathers to push out and that new set to come in. And during that process, they stay dry. Over to the right, we have 2 juvenile birds. This one on the left may even be a late stage chick. It still has a little bit of downy around the back of its neck. But you can see the difference in their plumage here. So at one point they will molt out of their juvenile plumage into the adult plumage. And then right up top here, we have a even younger chick. You can see it's in full downy. And typically the chicks won't be getting wet at this stage, but this picture was taken in the rehab setting. And Africa in the spring, it can get very, very hot. So we would do light mists over the chicks and then towel dry them. So he's a little bit damp in that picture there. Okay, introduction to SANCCOB. Okay, so in the late 1960s, there was an incredible woman by the name of Althea Westfall, and she set up a temporary organization in her home to try and treat these oiled birds. During this time, she was doing extensive research. She really wanted to know about the lifestyle of this bird, what was its dietary needs, and what were all the workings here. So in early 1968, she really, started inquiring about establishing a more formal rescue operation. So she was able to persuade Dr. Roy Siegfried, who worked through the Percy Fitzpatrick Institution of Avian Ornithology at the University of Cape Town, to kind of join her on this mission. And together in later 1968, they founded SANCCOB. All right, let's talk mission. So SANCCOB is a nonprofit organization whose primary objective is to reverse the decline of seabird populations through the rescue, rehabilitation, and release of ill, injured, abandoned, and oiled seabirds, especially endangered species like the African penguin. So I got this mission statement directly off of the SANCCOB webpage. I wanted to portray it in the exact way that they have set up and established here. I think it does a good job at pinpointing what, their mission really is. But I like to also add that there is so much that goes into this. So, some of the other factors to consider here are the oil spill response and the planning that goes into all of the rehabilitation. There are chick rearing and breeding plans behind the scenes going on. Original and collaborative research is also ongoing. They are training people from all over the world to handle and care for these birds in a safe manner. Education and public awareness, fundraising and revenue gaining, influencing local and global action, and overall just working towards harmonious existence between marine life and humans. So it really is a big mission here, you guys. Okay, locations. So currently SANCCOB has 2 locations. Their main campus, I would say, is located in a smaller region of Cape Town known as Tableview. That's over on the west coast here. And then if you follow it along to the east coast, we have the Port Elizabeth Center. So when I was there in 2018, I was at the Tableview Center in Cape Town. And what I've noticed while I was there was that these 2 centers work very, very well together. So they are constantly communicating. If one center is in need of support more so than the other, then they will definitely transport resources, staff, volunteers, really, however they need to get the job done. They work very well together to accomplish that. Okay, research initiatives. So disease surveillance is a very important part of the ongoing research taking place at this organization. So SANCCOB partners with many groups, some of which are listed here. And together they are really working to study the prevalence of avian influenza and other diseases that may arise in these birds. SANCCOB also was recently funded to conduct their own research, and they are doing this by collecting blood and other samples from all of the birds that come into the rehab centers, as well as any carcasses that are found on the colonies. The rangers will bring those in, and those are being contributed to science as well. So in this picture here, I took this before observing a necropsy while I was there, and this researcher is taking measurements. He, of course, is going to take all of those hard science, data points down, as well as internally collecting tissues and samples for this surveillance. So not only does this help to understand the mortalities that are occurring, but it helps to develop contingency plans for any future disease outbreaks that could occur. So it's important work. Tracking in Simonstown. So let's first start out by looking at this map really quick. So if you see here, we're kind of zoomed in down here in this False Bay area. So the Cape Town Center is not far from here. And this is a zoomed in version here. So we have the Table Mountain National Park right here. And these dark blue areas are restricted zones, which branch out into this medium blue area, which is all marine protected area. And then beyond that is just not currently protected area. So researchers are interested in the Simonstown colony, which is right here. They're interested because over the past several years, it's been relatively stable, even though colonies kind of in the vicinity have been declining. So they're wanting to support that. And one of the ways that they think they can do that is by tracking and monitoring where are these birds going to forage? And are these forage locations protected or not? Because ideally we want them to be so that it can hopefully stay sustainable for them. Oops. So researchers from SANCCOB, again, have partnered with BirdLife South Africa and Sand Parks to put on this study. And what's interesting is there's actually a lot of research going on in the same bay regarding other species, mammals and birds. So the hope is that, all of this collaborative research can make a difference. But in 2019, 15 African penguins from Simonstown who are breeding there were deployed with GPS and dive loggers, as well as cameras in some instances. So they were able to track these birds, and they found the results showed that these birds were foraging all throughout the bay, but they were utilizing this area up in the north as well as this east ledge of the bay. So this study is planned to continue, and like I said, they can kind of utilize the bit of data that they've collected so far, hopefully combining that with other species, and hopefully we can work together to kind of extend that protected area and support these colonies that are staying stable. Transponder work. So if you think about the little microchips that cats and dogs get, this is kind of a similar situation, but for penguins. So these are subcutaneous transponders. It's pretty non-invasive to hook up the birds with one of these. And in 2019, there were over 250 adults and more than 300 fledglings from the colonies that had these transponders inserted, as well as over 700 that were released through the rehab program at SANCCOB with the transponders. So over time, more and more birds are having these transponders inputted. And it's great because there's really so many directions we can take that information as far as analyzing and studying. So first step is, how do we read these transponders? Well, we do have ground readers. And when I looked this up, I read that there have been 9 placed throughout 6 of the main colonies so far. But I just actually saw a post a couple days ago about how they had implanted 2 or 3 more at a colony just recently. So this is, as I said, ongoing, and it's a growing operation. The colony staff and rangers also have handheld readers that, anytime they're out conducting nest checks or working in the colonies, they can scan if necessary to learn specific information about individual birds. The ground readers are nice because they can tell us a lot of information about when birds are coming into a colony and leaving. Quantitatively, it can show us a lot about movement and different things there. One of the really interesting analyses that I read about and was presented at the 10th annual International Penguin Conference in 2019 showed that the chicks that were being released from SANCCOB have similar survival rates as wild reared chicks, and they're also breeding at around the same age. And I just thought this was incredible. I mean, this is evidence showing that the work that's being done is contributing, and it's not withholding these birds from doing their natural behaviors in the wild. So it's good news. Yeah, and just as I mentioned, this transponder work can show us and shed light on movement of penguins, what their choice in breeding colonies are, possibly even tell us a little bit about food and where that is available. Okay, oil spill relief. Okay, a lot of you may remember this event, June 23rd, 2000, the MV Treasure sinks. So earlier when I was talking about the geographic range for these birds, I mentioned Dasson Island and Robben Island off the coast of South Africa. The Treasure sank. It was situated almost directly in between these 2 islands. Overall, it polluted the habitat of nearly 75,000 penguins, and that's not including all of the other species involved here. There was a total of 1,300 tons of bunker oil released into the ocean that day. So, immediately local research groups, conservation organizations were making moves to really launch massive efforts here to get these birds de-oiled and rehab to the best of our ability. So 2020 marked the 20th year since this event, and it is still recorded as the largest animal rescue operation in the world. It was really something. I mean, luckily I'm going to introduce a book to you in a second who can do a much better job at really explaining the details of this event. But there were 19,000 African penguins, hundreds of other seabirds rehabbed, and then close to another 20,000 African penguins were captured and translocated while the oil was being cleaned out of the ocean. And here it is, the book that I wanted to give a shout out for. Diane Dinapoli is the author, and she participated in this rescue and then wrote this book a few years later. So Diane, at the time of the rescue, she was a keeper at the Boston New England Aquarium, and she was able to participate by being in the first group to respond from America and go to South Africa and work along others in this rescue. So she does a really, really great job at in detail describing this event. It's very heartfelt. And if you're at all interested in the event or learning more about this species, I highly suggest this book. Okay. So sadly, I could go on with, discussing other smaller scale and larger scale oil spills that have occurred. But really the take home here is that before organizations like SANCCOB were established, virtually every oiled bird was dying. And I like to include this quote from the book. Keep in mind, this was written 11 years ago. And she says, due to the organization's dedicated efforts over the last 40 years, more than 85,000 penguins and other seabirds have been spared horrible deaths by oiling. So clearly that number has gone up since then, and it's another one of those factors that really encourage the work that's being done here. Preparedness. So of course, nobody ever wants for an oil spill to occur, but a part of the preparation here is having a plan if and when it does. And one of the things that's occurring right now off the shores of South Africa, specifically in Algoa Bay. We'll look at this map here. There's my mouse. So we're closer over on the east side near Port Elizabeth, and right outside of there is Algoa Bay. Again, there's a series of little islands in here that a lot of birds and other animals rely on. It's really a biodiversity hotspot in here. In 2016, they permitted offshore fuel ship-to-ship bunkering in Algoa Bay. And this allows up to 50 tankers to be situated about 30 miles off the coast for bunkering purposes. And they prefer this because it's cheaper than in-port bunkering. The unfortunate part is that since this has started occurring in 2016, there's been 2 major oil spills so far. So, SANCCOB, part of what they're doing is recognizing these things that are occurring. They're taking a stance on it, and they're lobbying against things like this in attempts to protect the wildlife. SANCCOB is also part of a global oiled wildlife response system. So they participate in meetings in groups all around the world. They are, of course, discussing case studies over past oil spill situations and scenarios, as well as putting themselves in situational drills. So really anything and everything that could occur, they're going through this, laying out what their resources and their steps would be to handle it. Okay, experience. So I do have a quick video to show you. It's about 5 minutes. I like to share this because, along with me explaining things to you with pictures, this just gives you a good visual of the kind of workings of the center. So I hope you enjoy.
I actually heard about this through a friend, and I decided to come because I was working with seabirds, rehabilitating them, and that was one of my weak points, so I thought it would be a nice learning curve. It's a 6-month program. I've been here 4 months so far, and so far it's been going great. There's nothing more beautiful than watching the eggs hatch, the chicks growing, you feeding them, watching them grow, putting them through the process until they get released into the wild again when they're old enough. It's been great. Learned a lot. I would recommend it to anybody.
I'm Irish. I'm a videographer back home, so this was just a hobby of mine. I've always loved penguins. This is actually my second time here. I was here earlier in the year, And as soon as I got home, I just wanted to come back immediately. It's so great working with professionals that are so high in their craft. They go through each task with us, explaining it bit by bit, but also explaining why we need to do it and why it's necessary. And they're also so helpful with any questions that we have. Take the time to answer them as best they can.
We came all the way from Colombia to SANCCOB because we wanted to have a volunteering experience somewhere nice, and we love penguins, so it's been a wonderful experience. We've had so much fun. We're definitely coming back, and well, also it's been like a bonding experience for us, and we've had lots of fun here. She said she's had a wonderful experience. She's met so many people, so wonderful people, that she never imagined she could do all of this at her age, and to be doing it together, it makes everything so much better.
My name is Grace Common. I'm from Kentucky, northern Kentucky, and I actually work for an aquarium there. I work for the Newport Aquarium, and I'm a conservation educator. So one of our programs is with our African penguins. We have 8 ambassador birds that we'll take to schools and to libraries. And while we're there, we're always talking about conservation and how we're working to save the birds. So one organization we always talk about is SANCCOB. I'm from 8,000 miles away, and we talk about SANCCOB on the daily as per my job. But I had never been here. I had never seen the work that SANCCOB does. So it was always something that I really wanted to do because I felt like it's more meaningful to preach about something that you're actually passionate about and actually know about. So since working for the aquarium, I've always wanted to come to SANCCOB. And actually was given that opportunity this year, so it's my last year at university, and it was a requirement that I complete an internship for my degree. And now here I am, working at SANCCOB, living the dream.
I came here to SANCCOB to help SANCCOB with all the abandoned chicks that are coming into their center that need to be hand raised and tube fed. Since I'm a zookeeper in Denver, I already have the expertise, know how to tube and feed young birds for release into the wild. And SANCCOB has so many different volunteers from all over the world that are all coming to help hand raise these penguins. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of that and to help them out. And we talk about SANCCOB all the time at the Denver Zoo during our live feedings and during our encounter programs. And so it's been a really great experience being here.
I'm from Austria, and I finished high school last year, and I went to study medicine, and I also want to do something exciting. So I took a gap year, and yeah, due to the fact that I love animals, especially penguins, and that I love traveling, I came here.
It has been amazing for me to see the people from all over the world coming to SANCCOB because they've got one goal, one vision, one heart to go beyond themselves. And often people think, I've got a passion, but I'm just one person, I can't make a difference. The person who started SANCCOB was one person. And so if you're watching and you're out there and you think, hey, I've got a passion to go beyond myself, to explore, to see, and to give back, then SANCCOB is a place for you because you will find a community whose heart is golden and whose heart is to conserve birds, to actually help them rehabilitate, to get back out there into the world, and then to take that back to their homes and to be able to do something with their lives that is beyond their own borders.
Okay. So that just kind of gives you some different inputs on the type of people who are coming to the center, volunteering their time, and you also got to observe some of the action behind the scenes there. So while I was there, we would meet every morning in kind of this common area, and this board was filled out specific to that day. And so you would have the areas were listed here. There was a column for birds. So this indicated how many birds were in each area. Activities, if there was anything specific going on for that day, whoever the supervisor was, the assistants, any specific training events that day, and then area tasks. They also would let us know when the next release was going to take place. And there was usually some, kind of fun social events that they would plan for us to get to know each other outside of the rehab setting as well. So all of the different areas throughout the center are listed here. There was the chick rearing unit, intensive care unit, an aviary, rehab pens, there's multiple, nursery, general, home pen, which are the birds who live at SANCCOB full time, jobs, mats and crates, and laundry. And every one of these assignments is extremely important. The centers could not run without any single one of them. While I was there, I worked in all of these areas besides the CRU. At the time that I was there, we were right at the start of chick season. So we hadn't gotten too many intakes just yet. And due to biosecurity purposes, they usually only let a few people in the CRU, since eggs and young chicks are very susceptible to a lot of things at that age. Okay, so right after our morning meeting, we would get into our wardrobe. As you can see, we wore these very stylish rubber oilskins. They're not very breathable. It is very extremely hot, but they do a good job at keeping you clean from guano and somewhat dry from the water that you're around. We also would wear neoprene sleeves on both of our forearms to protect our skin from bites and bruises. We would wear a neoprene glove on our non-dominant hand, eye protection, and Crocs. Those are the ideal shoe for penguin rehab. If you ever must know. Okay, so initially we spent some time in an area called General. And General is where they are preparing formula. So formula is basically a fish smoothie with some extra nutrients that, a lot of birds in the ICU or the nursery are getting formula, occasionally some in the rehab pens. There's a constant process of thawing fish and prepping fish. They have a walk-in cooler specifically for all of the fish. We also would prepare a lot of medications in this kind of kitchen general area. So if you see this clipboard down here, we received that from the veterinarian staff, and they would list out, which specific birds were getting what. We would then take that, fill the prescriptions, label them a certain way, organize them a certain way in these trays. So then essentially we can take all of this stuff that we're gathering and preparing in general, and we can take them down to the rehab pens. So once we're there, we set up these feeding stations where we have 4 seats, so 4 people feeding at a time, kind of seated in a circle here with our legs all facing the same way so that we can get up, grab a penguin, get back to our seat. It does become kind of like a penguin assembly line system. These are wild birds. We're trying to feed them quickly and efficiently and, make it as stress-free as we can. So at the feeding station, we have our bucket right here full of syringes, and these are going to be syringes full of fluids, formula, or a substance called Daros, which is basically an electrolyte fluid for penguins. We also have a large bucket of just regular fish, a bit smaller of a bucket that has vitamin fish, and smaller trays of medicated fish. And then you'll also see little tiny syringes down here. That's more medicine. So again, during this stage, we are learning how to properly handle the birds. Luckily, that was a skill that me and my coworker, Megan, at the time, who's pictured in this middle picture here, we already were familiar with this. So that was super helpful. That allowed us to, jump right into this process the second day that we were there. Okay, so another big part of rehab is nebulizing. So African penguins, just like other avian species, can be pretty susceptible to respiratory infections. So again, based on prescriptions from the vet, we would spend certain times of day putting certain birds in the nebulizer. This lid would close down, and then the prescribed air gets pushed into here and out these little holes. And they would stay in there for however long was prescribed, and that was a part of their medicating. This picture over here shows one of the rehab pools, and you saw it a little bit in the video as well. So you can see that there's this gate here that opens and closes. These ramps lead up into dry land spaces for the penguins to kind of dock and haul out on. And then what would happen is once a week, there was a day called grading day. And on grading day, the licensed rehabbers would divide up all of the areas and essentially look over every individual bird and determine if they were staying in the same class that they were already in, were they moving up a class, or were they eligible for release. So in this picture here, you see Marna, she's a rehabber, checking the feather condition of this bird. She also is going to look over any pre-existing injuries that the bird had. She'll be looking at its body condition overall, its eyes, its beak, its mouth. And then Megan here is taking notes. And so as part of this grading, they get put into a swim class because, of course, it's very important that we know that these birds can swim for long periods of time before we release them and expect them to support themselves. So the birds were given different colors on their temporary bands to indicate what swim class they were in. So if they had a brown sticker, they were considered a no swim bird. Not pictured here is a blue sticker, and that means that they're a 20-minute swimmer. And then if they had red on their band, either this kind of circle situation here, or sometimes the whole band was red. If it was red, they were an hour swimmer. So if we go back to this picture, imagine there are no penguins in the pool, all the gates are closed, so all the birds are up on land. We would look at our watch and, you know, okay, it's 12 o'clock. Let's put all of the hour swimmers in the pool. So we would gather all of the red bands, pick them up, and gently plop them over the edge here of the wall down into the pool. They would swim around, swim around. We'd wait until the last 20 minutes of that hour, add all of the blue bands to the pool. And then once that 20 minutes was up, we would add all of the no swim birds to the pool and then immediately open these gates back up, giving them the option to come out or stay in. So again, this is just, you know, putting them through the increments of being able to swim for long periods of time and making sure that they can handle it. And we do observe all of these processes as they're going. Generally, you know, this guy still has a bit of downy. He's a younger chick, almost a juvenile. So that's pretty typical for him to be a no swim still. Okay, so for the birds who graduated through their swim classes, they became eligible for release. And this was the super exciting part, of course. So here you see myself and my coworker Megan and some other volunteers from Germany. And we, on the day of the release, packed up one adult and 2 juveniles, drove about an hour and a half away from the center to release them at the Stony Point colony. So I got to sit next to this face for almost 2 hours in the car, and it was a good car ride. Okay, another little clip for you. So that's the moment right there. Definitely happy tears, a lot of emotion. And again, they try to space it out so that for the volunteers who are there, everyone gets to participate in a release. We released 3 birds on this day. Sometimes they'll release upwards of 20. It really just depends on, you know, the numbers coming into the center and what they're working with at the time. So unfortunately for every bird, it is not a cut and dry move through the sections to be released type scenario. Some birds are there for a lot longer. If they're coming in with major injuries and they need surgery or end up with a cast or anything of that nature, they're most likely going to spend some time in the ICU before even seeing the rehab pens and, you know, going through the swim classes. So these are a couple pictures working in the ICU. You can see here I am holding a penguin for Dr. David. He is looking these birds over. A lot of times we will do supplemental syringing with these birds to give them extra fluids, keep them hydrated because they're not in the water. Another picture here, this is one of the rehabbers, again, holding a bird for Dr. David to evaluate. Okay, so this picture here, it's kind of hard to see, but Dr. David is drawing blood from this bird's foot. So that was, I just wanted to include that to show there is actually a specific day. They have names for a lot of the days. This day was called Bleeding Day, and it's an extremely long day. I will never forget it. But we go around and hold the birds while blood is collected from every individual. And again, this plays into the disease surveillance research that I was talking about. And then it also is just helpful for, you know, the birds as they're going through the rehab process. This is just a picture of an identification card. So from the moment a bird is brought to the center, it is given a card specific to it. So we are able to write notes on these cards, you know, based on feeding. Did it undergo any procedures? Is it on any medications? This is how we know what's going on with each individual. Just a couple more behind the scenes photos of Dr. David doing some radiographs on a penguin. The Table View Center, luckily, in the past 5 years has been able to do some upgrades to their veterinarian area and other areas of the facility. They also have a surgical room with a large viewing window. So anybody who comes to the center, educational groups are able to see that in real time, and it's really neat. So the other reason why this rehab process may be prolonged for some birds is obviously if they come in as an egg or a chick, their process is going to be extended a bit. They are not able to fully support themselves at this stage. So again, no swimming for these birds just yet. They'll still go through the nebulizing. We'll still do feeds with them, and typically a supplemental fluid or Daros syringe in the middle of the day as well. Yeah, and this is just showing more of that. So you can see here that there's a lot less fish, if any. Some of these birds might be fed fish halves. Other than that, they're mostly getting syringed at this age. Mats and crates, the job that everybody was not their favorite, we'll put it that way. But nonetheless, extremely important for the workings of this organization. So for those of you who are watching, if you have experience with penguins, you know all about dry deck, you know about nomad matting potentially. It's kind of like dry deck. It's a little bit heavier of a substance. They have big rectangles of this matting in all of the rehab pens. So each day we would roll them up, put them on a cart, take them out around the back of the facility to power wash them. There's also all of these barriers that we could use to form temporary pens. So those are getting cleaned daily. There's also stacks and stacks of crates based on how many birds came into the center that day. So all of those need to be cleaned and reset. So this is very much so an ongoing process. And this picture on the right, I love a lot because you can see Table Mountain in the background. So that was always a fun backdrop. All right, so overall, I really could go on and on, but it was a fantastic experience. I met people from all over the world. I was exposed to some other species outside of the African penguins, and nothing but good things. So current opportunities. The center does offer 3 internship programs. So there's a seabird rehabilitation program, penguin nursery, and seabird chick rearing. The thing with these is that they do require a bit of time. It's a 3 to 6 month commitment. You do not need any experience to apply for these. And I can tell you that they are intensive. You are hands-on. You are definitely put into the role, and it's great experience. Anyone who has experience working with penguins in captivity, I highly recommend the animal professional experience. That is what I participated in 2018. It's built so that you can take hopefully a little bit of time away from your full-time job or whatever you're doing to go there for 2 to 3 weeks and basically put yourself in the workings of the center. So again, we spent about a day kind of figuring things out and learning where things go. And then we were right in there working with the birds. Same idea for the veterinarian experience program. For any of you who are more interested in the health aspect, you can shadow the vets, the vet techs, and work more inclusively in the ICU. Okay, so strengthening awareness, this is important. And, you know, for me, I think just openly communicating and spreading this knowledge is sometimes the key component here. There are a lot of people that don't even know African penguins exist, and that's okay. I mean, they don't necessarily occur in our backyard, but, you know, once you obtain this information and you learn kind of the workings of what's going on in different parts of the world, spreading that around is never going to harm. And that includes researching projects that are going on at other facilities as well. So while I was in South Africa, I also visited the African Penguin and Seabird Sanctuary, APSS, and they're doing you know, a lot of the same rehab work and great things in that aspect, but they're also supporting completely different projects that I didn't even mention in this presentation today, such as the artificial nest project for this species. So really dabbling in researching those other facilities can help in this network as well. Of course, there's usually fundraisers and Kickstarters going on. I know AZA did host a Kickstarter for the Invest in the Nest program a few years ago, and it was very successful. So keeping an eye out for those and contributing when you can is always great. Gift shops, you know, SANCCOB offers a lot of really cool adopt a bird programs where you can get a certificate, you can name the bird. And of course, all of those proceeds are going directly to the rehab pens to support. And then finally, I just wanted to give a shout out. I met a really, really cool person while I was in South Africa. Her name is Martine. She was working at SANCCOB at the time. She now works at the Two Oceans Aquarium in South Africa. She's an overall great person and conservationist. She created Waddle On socks. And if you go to the SANCCOB website, you can see the socks on there. They cost about $7 US. They can be shipped here. And if you're into penguins and you like socks, you should check it out. The proceeds, some of the proceeds go to SANCCOB. That's the part I didn't want to forget. Okay, so here's some resources for you on some of the things that I just covered. a little bit more about the Nest project, because that is really cool, exciting stuff. And then my personal email, if you or anyone you know has more questions about this, or maybe more questions about the, getting to Africa, what were your learning curves going to Africa, anything like that, I'm more than happy to discuss that with you or put you in touch with people that can help. So with that, I wish you peace, love, and penguins. And does anybody have any questions for me?
Yay. I have a couple of questions from the chat that some people mentioned. So I'll just go to the beginning.
Sure.
When you say the bay is unprotected and needs more protection, what exactly do you mean by that? Yeah, protected from what specifically?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know specifically what the regulations are, but I'm assuming it is tighter regulations on boating and ships and just passageways as far as who's traveling in and out of where, and otherwise possibly recreation wise as well, more along the coasts of that protected area. But that's a really good question. There's probably a lot of variables that go into it. That's all I can really say on that.
Okay. What, if anything, is being done to prevent future oil spills? Or are we not even doing anything about that yet?
I think a lot of it comes from lobbying against things like the ship-to-ship bunkering that are occurring, and just really staying involved and aware of the situations. A lot of it is involved in more of a political setting. So there are certain, people that you have to channel through, and it's quite a process. But I think their main step is just staying informed and lobbying for what they feel is the best bet.
Cool. Oh, and then this kind of actually ties into that. What does bunkering mean? What is bunkering?
Bunkering is the taking on of fuel needed by ships. So that's basically the most simple way of putting it. Again, I've never really seen the process, so I don't know what it all entails, but if I think about, ships taking on fuel, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for mishaps in that, especially if they're already, away from port and out in the sea.
Okay. Where do the fish come from that the penguins are fed?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like they have a I'm trying to think here. I may have to come back to that question because I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I know that they have certain suppliers that are able to provide these fish in a sustainable way to get them to the centers. Beyond that, I don't know specifically. I know it's local, but I don't remember the details.
And then the last question I have is what are some of the injuries that you see on the penguins? Are they injuries from like boats or predators or something else?
Yeah, definitely. There's a huge range of injuries. A lot of times, fishing line, plastics, definitely predators. While I was there, I did see one bird was brought in that literally had like a bite taken out of its abdomen. Sometimes they So these birds also, if you see this picture here, actually in the last slide, the shoreline is not very friendly. And these waves are, crashing in a lot of times. So even just getting out to sea and back on quite a feat for these birds. And if they're being thrown into the rocks, different environmental, aspects there, that can be dangerous as well. So they just have sprained or broken bones, feet, injured fingers, all sorts of things.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Great. That's all of the questions that I see. So I think I will pass things back to Sarah to wrap things up.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. That was so great. Thank you very much, Jessica. And I'm glad that all of you were able to join us today. I hope you enjoyed it as well. We do have a recording we'll be sending out, as well as some of the resources that Jessica provided. And coming up next week, we have a webinar about chimney swifts and many more in March, birding from biodiversity of Bella or of Detroit River, and a few more. We list all of our webinar schedule on our website, on our Facebook page, and in our Flyway Express e-newsletter. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you everyone for attending.